Welcome to the next episode of Build Insights podcast. Today we've got Joe Kirby from the ICWCI, the Institute of Clerk of Works Construction Inspectorate. Joe is the editor of the Site Recorder, which is the Institute's magazine, and he also works on the membership development team. We're going to be discussing how to get involved with the Institute, what the Institute can offer you, and what it determines as a brand standard in the industry. Joe, welcome to the podcast. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, but then please give us a little bit more information on your background. My understanding is that you are the editor for the Site Recorder, which is the magazine for the Institution of Clerk of Works and Construction Inspectorate, and also you are on the membership development team.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that and give the people listening an idea of what things look like for you and what you're about on a daily basis?
Yeah, so on a daily basis, I mostly deal with Site Recorder, obviously doing the editing of the next issue, getting obviously articles and information for the next issue of Site Recorder. But I also on a daily basis will deal with development in the membership process. Obviously, we'll go over it, throughout the conversation. But our members know we've had a lot of changes in our membership process over the last few years.
Okay.
We've developed the member grade, and we've now developed associate grade as well. So obviously, my background initially was dealing with the membership process in terms of processing applications.
Sure. So on the Site Recorder, obviously, it's quite an exciting aspect. It's sort of the window to the institute, is the way I see it, as one of the members. That creates quite a demand on you, I suspect, in the sense that you've got to find viable content on a monthly basis. How do you typically go about doing that?
So obviously we have chapters all over the country which will have CPD that is provided to them. So a lot of the time we'll ask chapters to contact us and say, we had this really good CPD. So they'll give us the information of who provided that CPD.
Sure.
And we can contact those companies or the people that provided them and ask, would you like to put your information in Site Recorder as well? We think this is an article that would be valuable for our members.
Yeah.
So obviously construction, people are learning every day, really, aren't they? So, a big part of what we try and do in Site Recorder is to offer both interesting content regarding the Institute and then interesting content regarding construction as a whole and stuff that can be useful for our members, really.
Absolutely. And never a month goes by where there's not something interesting. You just touched on a point. Learning, I think it's an incredible. I've talked about it loads, but it's an incredibly important part of what we do. So, I think, and the best way to learn is to share information. So, for me, the recorder is a really important part of that. In fact, on my personal CPD record, the recorder plays a big part.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you've looked at over, the years? I mean, how long have you been doing this now? Actually,
so I've been doing it for probably about a year and a half, I'd say.
Okay.
So Rachel was doing the Site Recorder before me, and then she's passed it over to me from there. So I've been doing it about a year and a half.
I imagine that was quite a hard thing to give away, actually. So she obviously values your professionalism, because I think when you're doing something creative like that, to hand it over must be quite a challenge. But
definitely.
Obviously you've done well with that, and it continues to be a fantastic publication.
Yeah, I
cut you off a little bit there, but in those 1.5 years, a lot of information's gone through that magazine. Yeah. Is there anything that stands out for you?
So obviously we've been looking actually recently to do articles on mental health and things like that as well. So it's quite important in the construction industry. If you look at the statistics, the construction industry is probably the one that's struggling the most at times with suicide and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's been a big kind of focus over the last few, probably 6 to 12 months, really, to try and get articles in there. We've had articles from Lighthouse Charity, Man Down recently sent one through, and we're going to be running something as well in the future from them too. Josh Tudor, who actually was on the podcast, he did an article as well regarding mental health that's gone in there. Yeah. So actually that's something I didn't mention. Obviously we also get content from our members as well, which is always brilliant. So to speak of another thing, Mark Reed, who's one of our membership directors, and he's on our management board.
Yes.
He's provided about 14 articles over my time doing stuff on the approved documents.
Yeah.
And things like that. And that's been, brilliant, really, a source of information. I think he quite enjoyed obviously doing it as well, because
it's great. I think we've touched on it in various conversations, if you're passionate about something, it often portrays very well.
Yeah.
The approved documents being a prime example, it's a continuous learning development process. Always the goalposts are always shifting, but fundamentally those documents form the backbone of what we do in terms of the work that we monitor and audit against. So it's great to be able to keep up to. If someone presents you, for example, with a pile of approved documents and go, "Oh, those are revisions," the likelihood of reading that, or certainly the likelihood of wanting to read that, is slim to none, I would argue.
Yeah.
But presented in the site recorder in the format that you give it, which is, I don't want to say bite-sized, but it's certainly manageable in terms of the content. It focuses on the changes, it focuses on the impact of the changes. Certainly something I've found very interesting. So again, thanks for that. There might be a few thanks in this, but it's great. It's great read. Hopefully you'll take something from today as well in terms of what we can do from a member perspective. Excellent. So in terms, so that's your role within the recorder. You're obviously editing that. You're taking all this information, finding a way to present it within the parameters, which I'm not envious of. I think it's probably quite challenging to do. And then the other part of your job is to be membership development. Yeah. So what's the start of that process, and sort of what does that functionality look like for you? And then we'll dig into that a little bit further through the podcast.
So I think membership development, I've kind of moved into that role as well at a similar time to Site Recorder, because this is over the last probably 2 to 3 years with the member grade development, and now with associate grade over the last year. There's been a lot of things changing within the Institute in terms of how we go about, having people apply for membership and supporting people that are applying, and also supporting members to develop into, to they're competent enough to be for member grade, basically. Yeah. So I moved obviously off doing the day-to-day membership application processes when I took over Site Recorder, and then added the development to it from there. So my colleagues Rita and Ellis deal with the day-to-day, applications coming in and doing that. So the development side, again, is kind of assisting our management board directors, really, who are very integral, really, in developing. So I can say, obviously, Dermot Russell, Ian Carey, Mark Reed, again, Jerry Shawbread. They've all been very heavily involved with developing the new processes, and I'm, assisting them from an HQ perspective, along with Rachel, really. So as I say, we've developed the new member process. I'm not sure. Did you do that process?
No, I'm old school. So it'd be interesting, actually. One of my questions I'm going to ask you as part of this is sort of what, for those people that are interested, we're going to touch on this as a separate point, but what does the new process look like, typically speaking? It might be, I don't know whether you can, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is that something we can talk about?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Great. So you've got a professional, you've got someone that's in the industry, they want to move into a professional capacity. They're very interested in joining the Institute. Yeah. What do they do?
So basically now associate grade has just been voted in at the last AGM last month. So that's also one that people can apply directly for. But we'll start, I guess, with member grade. So if somebody feels they have the experience, they have the qualifications, there are different things that make you eligible to apply for member grade. So it's stuff like if you've got 8 years experience in a site inspection role, then you're eligible. And if you've got 3 years but a level 6 qualification that's relevant, you can apply for member grade. So they can apply on our website. There's a join us button at the top that takes you to the web application form.
We'll bob a link on the bottom of this as well for people to pick that up as well.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested in pushing into that, just follow the link at the bottom of the page. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. Yeah. And so, they'll click that form. You fill it in. It's pretty straightforward, the actual initial application. We'll ask, obviously, how you're applying based on what eligibility criteria. And then you can include your CV and things like that, which is for the purpose of checking the eligibility for HQ, basically.
Sure.
So that'll come in, we'll check you're eligible, and then you pay the entry fee at that point once we've checked that you're actually eligible to apply for that grade. And the next part is the competency report, which is quite the fundamental change, really, that's been added to the process. So a lot of the work went into basically defining for the competency report what those competencies are, in line with what we expect from a clerk of works who would be at member grade. So it's corporate member, basically, that's what we call it. So the competencies for that level, as you probably know yourself, a clerk of works has a massive breadth of knowledge, don't they, really?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that knowledge, and what's interesting is for me that knowledge comes from various experiences.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge that you probably face when you're designing these competencies is allowing people to demonstrate their skill set from their perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm learning more about this process. Obviously, as it's not a process I was part of, as I mentioned, but as I become more involved with the institute, you know, this is one of the things I'm looking at doing this week. So, so what's your experience like been since these changes were made? Has it been a positive impact?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had a lot of people applying for the new process. I think the benefit of that process is it's quite thorough, basically. You know, if somebody's going through that process and coming in at member grade, what we want to ensure is that if an employer is looking to employ a clerk of works and they see that they are ICWCI, they can say, okay, they've been quite thoroughly competency checked, and they have the knowledge that we really are requiring for them to do the role.
Absolutely. I mean, commercially, that's where you create value, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a standard and the minimum standard of that capacity is excellence, or near as you can, then that's a great product to have, and it's important. And it's important as well that the members appreciate they've achieved that, and in the instances where perhaps they don't, that there is a pathway for them to then follow through to get to that point. So speaking of that pathway, let's talk about someone that perhaps has got some experience. It might not be the exact experience that we need, or that you need rather, that to get them to member. What we certainly don't want to do, I think, is dishearten those people. Or certainly I wouldn't like to be disheartened if that was my position. So what happens there?
So what we've done is actually that's why we've looked to introduce associate membership in now. Because obviously we did all this work to change member grade in the process, and that's all working well and it's in a good place. But then we needed to formulate the grades around member, you know, in service of getting people to member grade, basically, to ensure that people can, you know, develop within the institute to reach that what we require for member grade from there, basically. So we looked at previously we offered licentiate grade, which is still a grade that is a recognised membership, obviously, of the institute, and it's still an ongoing membership grade. But we've now superseded that with associate grade. So those two grades are at the same level.
Okay.
But associate grade, we thought obviously the word associate was maybe more understood in industry of what level it was compared to, say, corporate member.
I think so. I mean, if you look at some of the other institutes, memberships, charterships, etc., the associate is one that is commonly used, and I think it sort of, certainly from the outside looking in, it sort of develops a feeling of a journey, the start, the middle, the start, the beginning of something that leads to membership. And also, licentiate is a really hard word to use, spell. So, you know, I think but yeah, no, I agree. So associate then, I want to be an associate. How do I do that?
So it's a similar initial process. So actually, if you click that Join Us button on the site, it actually goes to a page where you can select between member and associate applications now. So the associate one is a similar form. You obviously put your information in there, and it has its own eligibility criteria, but obviously they're quite a bit lower in terms of levels than they are for member, basically, to reflect that it's the more developmental grade. So it's stuff like if you have, you know, 3 or 4 years experience, you can apply for it. Or if you have 1 year's experience and a qualification at level 5, you're eligible to apply. And I think 2 years experience and a level 4 or construction trade qualification, you can then apply for associate. Because, sorry, I just mentioned the other grade we have is student grade as well, which is, that's the very entry grade. So that's for, there's no interview or things like that. That's for people who are just starting out, you know, in their construction careers, basically. Who are maybe working on a qualification or things like that. So they can apply directly for that.
It allows them to get, you know, benefit from the CPD and obviously the community. So if I may, just skipping back to associate then, is there an interview for that?
So the way associate works is we try to formulate it around the competency side of the member grade, because we want to kind of prepare people for that process when they apply to upgrade to member. So for associate, you apply directly, and then there is a shorter report version that is then assessed by our membership hub directors. So there's not a interview section for associate, but there is still a competency process, basically, that associate applicants have to complete. We thought it's important that you need to at least, you can't just apply for it directly and get it just based on qualifications.
Absolutely. No, I think fundamentally people need to be able to present themselves. It's one thing to be qualified; it's another thing to be able to do the job.
Yeah.
Which is paramount. Is that so? If once you are graded as an associate under this new structure, is there a minimum time frame before you can apply for member, or what are the sort of KPIs, for want of a better description, that you need to achieve within that process?
Yeah, so there's not specific. You could apply for member when you feel ready, basically.
Okay.
But the idea for us is we want to give our associates a specific, we recommend you do this over the next few years to prepare yourself for member.
Yeah.
Part of that is something I'm developing at the moment, is to have a diary format from our website, basically,
Like
where
a journal.
you can sign into the site, and then it'll have all of the competencies for member grade listed, basically. And what we want our associates to do over their time at that grade is to input examples from site where they have displayed competence in line with those competencies, basically.
Okay.
As we found, with people applying for member, there's a lot of people that they have the competencies, but sometimes they can just think, I'm not sure where I even start really on putting that across, basically.
Yeah, it can be tricky, can't it? Because I think it comes down to the environment in which you use your competencies. It also comes down to the way that you communicate, generally speaking. So I think any structure that complements that is well worth having. Yeah, and ultimately, it sort of directs people, if you will, to all consider a similar approach. Yeah, which then creates the brand standard for the institute, and I think that's incredibly important. Yeah, so it all sounds highly positive to me. Going to the other end of the scale, I'm not going to ask you too much on this because I know it's a developing thing, but there's been very sort of light conversation around the route to chartership. So I suppose the question to ask is, is there a status and direction for the institute on that basis, and where's that up to, and what does it look like? Yeah,
so obviously that's an ongoing process still. So we've got the backing of the members to go through that process now. Sure. So I think obviously what we say is we have a focus group that's dedicated, made up of our management board directors and Rachel, our CEO, that are dedicated to this chartership process. They've also got a governance expert who's come in, who's dealt with other institutes before, to obviously get them through that process, to obviously give us advice and stuff and help us through it as well. So they're currently in the process of going through that. There's not necessarily too much to update on it at the moment.
No, of course, and these things are complex and they take an incredible amount of time. Yeah. So we'll keep our ear to the ground and we'll look forward to any updates. But it's exciting, the fact that the members have voted that in is an incredible step in the right direction, in my opinion. So we look forward to seeing what that looks like in the near future.
And obviously any updates will go in site recorder and out to members as and when they come through, basically.
Yeah, so if you want to know, you need to get an associate membership pretty quick, or student membership, or even a membership, and get that magazine on your doorstep. Yeah. Okay, great. So in terms of, I just want to go back to the recorder a little bit. I think it's an incredible tool, and I think we've talked about the information coming in, the information that you develop. But probably a question I'm really interested in asking you is, the recorder, you being the editor of the recorder. In fact, actually, let me ask you this question slightly differently. You've got numerous roles in the Institute, Joe, and they're all, highly competent in terms of the processes. Yeah. How do you feel your role complements the mission of the Institute, and ultimately, what does the mission of the Institute look like over say the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my role with Site Recorder and with the membership development, I think, complements the mission, in numerous ways, really. So obviously, Site Recorder is our voice to the members. It tells the members what's going on. And I think it's important, really, to have a tangible thing that goes out to members. I know, obviously, you have, people will send emails and stuff we have an electronic version of it as well. Sure. But I think to go out to members with a tangible magazine and things like that feels like, we are in contact with them. We're keeping people updated on the things that are happening. Obviously our members are a lifeblood of the Institute, really. So we want people to feel engaged and like the institute is talking with them regularly. And then obviously for the mission and the membership development side, obviously the mission of the institute is to provide value and to develop and help our members really, and to support them in their role on site. So, you know, a big part of the membership development stuff is making sure that we have our grades in positions that can assist people that want to apply for them.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the associate stuff, I was a big part of, you know, saying that, look, we need to make changes here to improve our developmental offerings. We've got this new process for member, which is great, but also it is quite a difficult process. You know, it's something that people will have to prepare for. So now we've got that in place, we probably need to look at developing something to help people prepare themselves really for when they apply for it. So that's where associate came in for that.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, speaking of the site recorder, obviously you perhaps don't realise this, but certainly in my office, I've got every single copy there since the time that I became a member.
Yeah.
And we use it as a reference point a lot. So, you know, we'll often have weekly major projects teams meetings, for example, where the major project surveyors get together, and that's designed, one, to discuss nuances, and the other one to workshop them out effectively. Yeah. And there's been numerous occasions where we've gone back to the recorder. We talked about the the regulatory changes in terms of the approved documents. We've used that as a reference often in our approach to doing that. So, and I assume that you've probably learnt a lot through that as well. So your experience must be developing by virtue of the fact that you are editing and sending all this information out. So how do you think how do you think the last 1.5 years, 2.5 years, what did you say earlier?
About 1.5.
1.5 years. How's your experience changed then by virtue of the fact that you, well, essentially from forming a magazine that you edit, you know, has it been a positive impact to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think over the last 5 years, really, with COVID as well, there's been a lot of changes. Obviously, at the start of COVID, we had to find a way to do interviews, basically, for new members without people going to face-to-face.
Yeah.
So I obviously put in place a way for us to do them remotely via video. But that entailed, obviously, myself and my colleagues, we would host the interviews and things like that. So obviously, we'd watch a lot of people who were applying. We'd obviously host the interview to make sure everything ran smoothly. But then we'd see the process of the interview in terms of like the photographic exercise. So I think I could be quite good at the photographic exercise now, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, I don't have that technical construction knowledge, but from witnessing those interviews, you pick up quite a lot of things really, which is actually useful for Site Recorder as well, because you can take obviously things from the photographic exercise and think, okay, that is useful, a useful area to cover really. But what you really see from working with it is just how much is always going on in construction really. There's always new developments and new changes.
100%. I mean, we walked around Manchester City Centre before this recording, and we had a conversation along the lines of, you know, construction expertise or not, you can still appreciate architecture and the built environment. And I think hopefully the short walk that we did portrayed the excitement that I've got for Manchester as a developing city. Sort of the journey over the last 10 years in this town has been phenomenal. The next 10 years look even more exciting. So it's great to see that, and hopefully that's something you can take back and we can relay that experience to the readers, but also for yourself. You know, I think to go to new places and experience these things, what we've done in real life today is effectively what the Site Recorder does for its readers. To offer that insight to an environment that perhaps they wouldn't already see. So that's great. Looking at the Institute as a whole then, looking at what it does, we've talked about how to get into it, we've talked about the competency levels, the process. But in terms of the consumer, so you touched on it just earlier in that you said, you know, if someone is looking to employ a clerk of works, then, you know, you need to ensure that the membership grade portrays a certain standard. And I couldn't agree with you more. But I think there's also an industry standard there. And I think that industry standard is that we as Clerk of Works now, as construction inspectors generally, are now being called upon, obviously post-Grenfell, which has led to the redevelopment and facade remediation of thousands of projects across the UK. We're being called on more heavily now to offer third-party assessment of these projects.
Yeah.
And the Institute of Clerk of Works is named in the Department of Levelling Up's criteria as a standard.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. You know, if you think about it, you know, that sets members of the Institute above a rather large amount of surveyors that are in the industry. So the point of me saying that is that if you're not a member of the Institute of Clerk of Works and you don't know what it's all about, hopefully this recording will offer some more insight into that. But also dig a little bit deeper, get on the website, get an email into you, the team that you work with, who are a phenomenal team of people who I've had the pleasure of meeting personally, and then understand it more. What can people expect from timeframes? So let's say if someone wanted to, they've got an amount of experience, they want to take their career to the next level. And let's, for argument's sake, say that they want to consider associate. If someone was to get involved with you, how long do you think it would take for them to be in a position to sort of get to that stage? And I'm not going to hold you to this, but it's a question that people often ask me. Oh, how did you get into that, and how long did it take?
Yeah,
you know, that sort of thing. Not to pin you down to a time frame, but is it a fairly fluid situation? Are we looking at 6 months?
So it obviously varies for the different grades. We'd say for associate, it should be quite a succinct process, basically, because the report will go to our membership hub directors to assess.
Yes.
They'll do an assessment from there, and then the result should go through to the associate. To the applicant, from there, basically. Part of our membership process is there's an election element. So anybody that's coming into associate, student, member, fellow, etc., their name goes into Site Recorder. So if there was an issue, it gives our current members a chance to voice that in a certain period of time.
Yeah.
Don't let that put you off. It hardly ever happens. So, but it's just a normal process we have.
And it's a valid process.
Yeah.
Because it's designed to maintain control by the existing members.
But obviously, Site Recorder's done the month before, so that election will, there'll be a few weeks after you've got your result where you'll be waiting for the election. But obviously, we can, get you started in that membership at that point anyway, so it's not a problem. So associate should be quite fluid. Basically, we have the membership hub directors there to assess the report. For member, it can take a little bit longer because there's obviously more facets of the actual process. So the initial application will be quick. We come back to you within a day or two, really, to get stuff moving from there. The competency report, really, it's how quick really you can do it. A lot of people will sit on it for a while.
And competency reports, when you've not seen what one looks like, can be quite a daunting process. So actually this might be a good opportunity for us to not run through it, but sort of touch on the key values of it, and what you would expect is it a long? I haven't done it, so this sort of superseded my membership route. Is it a long, for those listening, is it a big process?
It's not actually. I mean, it's basically when we were designing it, we wanted it to encourage people to be as succinct as possible on the different points they put in. So I think it's up to about 3,000 words, which sounds a lot when you say it, but actually when you get going, it's not too bad, really. That's if you were looking at A4 pages, that's probably 3 or 4 pages, maybe a little bit.
And
more.
Is that broken up into?
So it's broken up into individual sections and individual competencies, basically. So there's 5 sections that cover all the aspects of construction. You don't have to do every competency in every section. You can choose, 5 in section A, I think it is.
Okay.
The only mandatory one you have to cover is one from section B, which is related to health and safety. Because that's obviously
important stuff.
Crucial part, basically. So effectively, what we're looking for, obviously, in section A, you have 5 competencies to cover, but you have up to 800 words to actually cover that. So that's not, that's quite a succinct amount, basically.
Yeah.
So
it's quite focused writing, that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, you've got to portray the situation and put your case forward in a relatively short.
But what we do offer to assist as well is I actually run tutorial sessions. So every 6 weeks, basically, we'll have a tutorial session on a video call.
Yeah.
So if people are applying and they want to just have a little go in the tutorial and just see how we recommend people put their report together, everyone's welcome to obviously join that who've applied.
I didn't know that. That's quite interesting. So how do people find that?
So we'll obviously relay it to them when they apply, that's available for them. Okay. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, if you feel confident to do it, but we would recommend you do it because, I found when I was dealing with it, a lot of people would just, you could tell from their experience, you have this, you have the competencies for this, but they're just unsure of how to put it across, basically. Because what we're looking for is competence for our report is defined as like not just having the knowledge, but having proven knowledge. So something, you have the experience, but you've actually done it basically on site.
So you're looking for context there in terms of someone's writing. So, I've experienced this is how I dealt with it, and this is where I dealt with it.
So, if they had an issue on site, we want them to give a specific example where they say, I came across this issue on site using this experience, this knowledge, this is how I dealt with it, and this was the outcome from there. We don't want people to say, if this happened, I know I should do this, because that's not really displaying competence. That's just kind of relaying what you've learned. Basically.
Yeah, you could Google that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I get that. So you want people to tell their story.
Yeah.
And you want it to be quite focused. I think it's interesting to talk about these things because there'll be a few. I'm probably one of them, actually. I look at these processes and I look at it and I go, well, I know how to do my job.
Yeah.
How do I relay that? So I think that's really good advice for people that might be listening to this podcast to sort of break down that initial barrier and say, actually, get pen to paper. Mm-hmm. Let's try and put it together. So in terms of the vision of the Institute, integrity is probably the biggest challenge that you will meet in a third-party audit role.
Yeah.
The amount of people that will, or let's rather not pin it on people, but the amount of situations that will arise where people will try and influence you in terms of your decision making, in terms of what you pick up on, what you don't. The ability to remain integral to a process, but completely disconnected from the politics, if you will, that form that process. It's quite a skill, and I think that's probably my advice to people that I'm working with now that work on my team, or my peers that don't work on my team, as colleagues in the industry, etc. Quite often, that's what we talk about is the integrity to stand alone and represent something, even though everyone else is looking the other way.
Yeah.
And I think that on its own, as one of the core values of the Institute, is an incredibly challenging prospect, but one I'm incredibly proud of to have been able to maintain across various platforms. And
I think that's an important thing for our members, really. It can be a lonely role, really, when you're that third party on site. But you then, being a member of an institute such as ours, you have that backing of something, behind you that, you have a core of other members there that will want to assist you. That's why we also recommend going to our chapters and things like that, because if you meet the people there, they've got such a breadth of knowledge in different areas of the industry, and they're always going to be helpful and always willing to support you as well with their advice.
Well, look, let's talk about that a little bit, actually. So the chapters, for those people who don't know, a chapter is a geographically placed group of people that are members. There could be any level of membership within the Institute, and they meet on a semi-regular basis, organised places. And it's well, you tell me, Joe. What's it for? Why do we do that?
Yeah, so obviously, as I say, we have chapters all over the UK. We also have a branch in Hong Kong as well. So it is to bring our members together, basically, so they can have a place where they can speak with other clerks of works, site inspectors, and other members, and discuss things they've come across on site, things that they're concerned with in the industry, and feel like they have a community really with other members, basically. So we'd recommend anybody that's a member obviously attends, but also if you're applying for membership, you're more than welcome to attend our chapter meetings whilst you're in that process. They'll be happy to see you there. Some of our chapters have WhatsApp groups as well, where they're in contact with each other, where if they come across an issue they're not sure of, they can obviously ask advice.
Which is incredibly important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've said this 1,000 times. No one knows everything.
Yeah.
But lean on people, and people will always assist. I think this goes full circle, actually. At the top of the conversation, we talked about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about it as we've been speaking, and it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
We just talked about a trigger of something that may be a trigger of a mental health situation. Loneliness.
Yeah.
You're right. This role, if occasionally you will feel like the only person in the room because you are actually standing up for a value that nobody else wants to value.
Yeah.
And it's important, and I think this is where we go full circle. So chapter meetings, the ability to pick up the phone to the team down in Peterborough, that connectivity, that thing that sort of takes you from an isolated position and brings you into a bigger organisation that will represent you in terms of, doing your job and being, or even if you just want to talk actually about any given situation, or just about, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that there's a counselling function at the institute. However, what I will say is, anytime I've been in contact with anyone from there, the time that I visited, I was made to feel incredibly welcome, and that's important. So I suppose what I'm saying to people that are listening to this is, if you are struggling, if you are in this role, then before you do anything else, speak to somebody. Like you said, you've got Lighthouse, you've got Man Down, you've got all these other organisations, but also you've just got your mates. Yeah. You've got chapter members and colleagues in the industry, and it is incredibly important to do that. So I think chapter meetings are something that people seeking membership can look. So where would they find that? It's on the website, right? So you go on the website, there's a list of chapters. How does that work?
So on the website, there's a list of the chapters and their secretaries. So our members, it's obviously a volunteer role. They'll act as a chapter officer, and they'll give their details on the website. But also, if you want to contact HQ, we're happy to obviously do the introductions and put you in touch with your local chapter as well, really, to get your foot in the door before you go to one of the meetings, so you know where you're going and all that stuff, really.
Yeah, quite daunting when you just walk in and everyone sort of, but I needn't be, because certainly the chapters I've been to have always been very accommodating. Yeah, very normal people. Yeah, just trying to go through processes and ultimately offload a little bit. I think, it's important.
I know myself. Obviously, I've worked for about 13 years now in the institute, and I've attended quite a few conferences and just speak with people on the phone as well. Like, made a lot of friends really with a lot of the members. I know a lot of people that will call. I will know them already from speaking with them before, basically. So yeah, as you say, we're always happy to hear from our members, and if you want to come in and meet us and stuff like that, that's also something we're more than happy to do. And for the Site Recorder as well, if you have something that you think, what, I'd like to see something on that in there, please do get in touch, and suggest topics that you think would be useful to see in the magazine, really, because it is the members' magazine. So
tell your number, tell your number, tell your story. Because we're all interested in reading it. We'll do a link. We'll do a hyperlink that takes people to the website. The website will then provide contact information for you, and we can go from there. What does the future? Is there anything in particular you want to get to on the future, or? So
the future is, we're still obviously, as membership development, really developing associate. Obviously, it's just come into play the start of the end of last month, basically after the AGM. So that's going to be a constant thing that we add stuff to, basically, from there, because obviously construction's always moving, so there's always going to be things to add to it. So as I say, that online portal is something that I'm looking to put together in the coming weeks, basically, to offer to our associate members when they come into that role. And then we're looking to do, obviously, progress meetings with our associates and things like that, so where we'll have our membership hub directors on there, so they can answer any questions they may have at points and things too, really. And then we're developing recommended pathways and stuff like that, and just an overall recommended way to progress to member grade, really. And then obviously from there, the chartership stuff is stuff we're in the process of, and just developing our offerings and how we can support our members from there, really.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing we haven't talked about, actually, is that there's another grade of membership, which is fellowship, which is obviously designed for people that have been a member for an amount of time. What sort of criteria does it take to go from member to fellow?
So that's actually another thing that we've developed in the last year. We've actually changed the criteria for fellow as well. So previously it was just based on a certain amount of years and then your involvement with the institute, which is still an element of it. But we've lowered the years to, you have to been at member grade for 5 years, or at licentiate or associate for 2, and member for 3.
Sort of a combined membership.
Yeah, and then there's also a similar sort of report aspect of it, which is more of a citation, really, for fellow, that we want people to display how they've gone above and beyond member grade, basically.
Okay.
So obviously, for people that are fellows of the institute, it should be people that are heavily involved with both the institute and also doing specific things in the industry. Basically, like how have you gone above and beyond what would be expected of somebody that's at member grade to be worthy of, say, fellow grade from there, really. So, we have people on our management board, the things that they've done for the institute, people that are assessors for the institute, people that have done specific things at chapters and stuff like that, obviously will be eligible for that. But also it can be stuff, completely outside of the institute, really, if you've gone above and beyond in certain aspects of the industry, or completely unrelated to construction even, really, because fellow is a grade which is it's reflective of not so much, the competence, stuff like that. It's more reflective of you have gone above and beyond in the institute.
I think look, from my perspective, it's viewed as a prestige title. It's certainly one that needs to be earned, and it carries, certainly in my network, it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah,
but that's interesting. We've looked at how people can get involved.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to provide website information for that.
Yeah,
we've looked at the new and developing associate role, then membership, and then fellowship. And then, but what's important for me is that regardless of which position you come into, there is a massive support network there.
Yeah.
And I think that for me personally, that is what creates the true value of the institute.
Yeah.
And then on top of that is that because of all those values, because of the genuine value that it creates, that portrays a very high level of competence in the industry. And it's important. So if somebody listening to this has been acting in the role and wants to get to the next level, I urge them to get involved and certainly look at the institute and see where you fit in that at the moment. If we've got another thing that I want to look at as well in the future is sort of the education side of this, as in people coming through education, universities. We talked about level 6 competency earlier in one of the criteria set. There are going to be people coming out of universities that want to seek roles within the construction industry. And actually, I talked about this with Josh Tudor a little bit, is the availability, if you will, or the awareness of the role of a Clerk of Works. It's very much on the return.
Yeah.
I think the timing of us doing this podcast is paramount in terms of that. It's been a pivotal point in time where people are now leaning into it. But I'm still cautious that the universities, the criteria, the curriculum, whatever you want to call it, within that learning period, doesn't necessarily display the Clerk of Works as a viable route post graduation. Is that something that the industry is looking at?
Yeah, that's actually something we're very. That's because you mentioned it, really, because as part of the associate also, we've had obviously Jerry Shawbread, who's been on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
There's Dr. Paul Hampton, who's from the University of Wolverhampton. We have a module with Wolverhampton that is accredited basically by the institute, which is
interesting.
It's a specific module that has stuff on site management and site inspection and Clerk of Works roles. But we're looking to branch out throughout the UK basically with different accredited qualifications potentially in the future, and I think Jerry's going to be involved with going to colleges and stuff like that to kind of see what's happening there, and also put across, as you said there, what the Clerk of Works role entails, really, and hopefully get some younger people interested in moving into that role too.
Well, we need to. I discussed it with Josh, actually. We've got a fantastic demographic of people in the role at the moment. But the reality is time doesn't stop, and there is going to be a gap, I think, between some of the top end Clerk of Works that we've got in the industry now that are going to eventually seek retirement, and what the sort of new workforce, if that's a word, can you use that? What the new demographic looks like, in terms of pushing the industry forward. So I think it's incredibly important to sort of assist on that. And let's not go into too much detail there, because there's very obviously some development to do in terms of what that looks like. But more importantly, I think it's content enough on its own for us to have a separate discussion. Maybe I can get yourself and and the others, Jerry and Dr. Hampton.
Yeah, Dr. Paul Hampton,
to have a serious discussion around that.
Yeah, and Dermot Russell actually is helping us with accrediting the courses. So we ask for stuff to come through, showing us what the modules are and the information, if it aligns with what we're.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, look, it's important to make sure all these things work, but it's very exciting, and I look forward to seeing what that looks like in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of previous podcasts, the most recent podcast that I did was with a guy called Phil Chell, and Phil was Phil still is very much the CEO of Chiron AI.
Yeah.
AI is creeping into the industry, not creeping in. I think it's coming in full force actually, and I'm not against it. I think it's got it offers a huge amount of value to what we do. Do you think? I mean, what's your opinion of AI in the built environment in terms of your perspective from the institute?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say obviously AI. There's so many different aspects of it. There's obviously there are aspects of it that will assist everything going forward, aren't there? That you can't completely discredit AI just based on your opinions of things like ChatGPT and stuff like that.
Sure.
There's so much more to it than just that, really. Obviously, in the construction industry, it's going to be assisting real people as well, isn't it? Because construction is one of those industries where there's always going to be people involved, isn't there?
It's interesting you say that, because that is the basis of our conversation, to be honest. I think the fear factor of AI has always been, we lose control and the robots are going to take over, so to speak, etc. But the reality is that the more people you speak to that have actually got some meaningful input to it, is that it's designed as a tool to cut some of the weight out of the day-to-day tasks. And one of the important factors, and it links back into what we've been discussing in this podcast, is that you can't replace competencies. I think regardless, if I did a job, represented the institute, represented myself and my commercial values, if you will, and I put my name on that job, and that allows me to offer my professional opinion. It allows me to apply my skill set, etc. If I were to use AI, it would offer exactly the same, but it would be slightly less work for me to do it, and I think that's the value I see in it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The reason I asked you the question, it's just interesting to understand people's perspective, because some people are sort of, yes, let's go, let's push into AI. Some people are a little bit more wary of it. But I think as long as I think you touched on it there very well indeed. As long as you understand that it's there to assist and it's not a replacement for competence, integrity, then it's got a huge place in this industry.
That's the thing, like with our competency report, I think, if you asked AI to write a competency report, I reckon they could do tell you what they should be doing on it. But I don't think an AI bot could actually.
I hadn't thought of that.
Put competence across, could it?
Joe,
though, really?
It, perhaps not, but actually, that is a risk, isn't it? People start. I know on a smaller scale, but it was entertaining, but actually quite a serious subject. We got a letter. I've got 2 daughters, and we got a letter back from the school saying, look, some of the kids have worked out that they can use AI to do their maths homework. It turns out that wasn't the case in our house because they hadn't quite figured it out yet. But it is interesting. But I think it was fair to say that chat, for example, it sort of speaks its own language. So I think you'd see that coming, right? I
think personally for me, ChatGPT, it has some tells at the moment where you can be like, that's written by ChatGPT. There's certain things it does where you're like, that's that, you can tell that it's AI that's done that. I think one of the things, if you look at it will use like a hyphen or something in ways that normal people just wouldn't use that.
Right.
Like there's certain tells from it. Obviously, it's going to be getting better and better over the years. So there are also, I think, stuff online where you can put words into it and it will give you a percentage of this is 99% written by AI. So there are ways to an extent. I mean, we haven't had to do that so far. Like obviously anything that's come through to us so far, we've never had a concern that it's written by AI.
Is it a real risk though? I mean, I feel like if that were the case, you would get a lot of common answers.
I think it would be hard, really, because the issue that the reason we did the tutorials and stuff is to put your competence away to us in a specific way. You have to give a specific example of something you've come across on site and how you dealt with it and how the outcome from it.
Yeah.
So I do think it would be kind of hard for AI to kind of get to that level, really, because it would be saying, about stuff that it would do if certain things happen, because obviously it's not actually done it, has it? So
Absolutely, yeah. When you put it like that,
so I it's not something we're too concerned about, obviously, or from our end, but it's something obviously to keep an eye on, because it's an area that's always developing, isn't it? Currently, so
100%. Well, yeah, and with that development will probably become new criteria. You know, I think as and when AI becomes a sort of a more established tool in the industry, presumably we will need to adapt how we look at that, because you know, I think we've got to accommodate it. It's going to happen, one way or another. It's going to happen, and I think it'll be largely positive. But then policing that, making sure that people know how to use it, making sure, for example, in the capacity of this conversation, making sure members are aware of the risks associated with AI, but also the positives and how it can be really effective in what we do.
I mean, it's a tool like any other, isn't it? Really, it needs to be used effectively and correctly, but also policed as well in ways that other tools are. So
100%, yeah. But I look forward to seeing how that develops, and obviously things like that create so much opportunity for us to have future discussions. So let's watch this space.
100%.
I think that's a wrap. Yeah, of course. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you about these things. I think we've given great insight to people listening into to how they can get more involved with the Institute, how they can develop through the Institute, and more importantly, just how to get in touch with the Institute. So thank you for coming in, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future.
Thanks so much, obviously, Ben, for having me on the podcast as well.
You're absolutely welcome.
It's been brilliant what you've been doing with this podcast, and it's getting some traction, and the content has been really interesting from what we've seen so far. So really appreciate you having your
fantastic, and thanks for the compliment. I'll take those all day.